Our guest is here. Excellent. We are joined with the one and only Laith Marouf. Laith Marouf is an award-winning multimedia producer and broadcasting law consultant. Laith, what is going on, my man? How you doing this morning? You doing all right?
Doing all right. Thank you very much for the invitation, Jamarl.
Oh, man, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you joining me. I remember the first thing I asked you yesterday, well, were you safe? You are in Lebanon currently, Beirut, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, I am in Beirut. There's a few drones flying up here. You can't hear them, but the minute I open the window, you would be able to hear them.
What is going on the ground over there? I look, man, the images that have been coming out have been deeply disheartening. It seems that the Israeli government has decided to, the way correct me, I'm going to try to explain it, but correct me if I get this wrong. It seems that the Netanyahu government has decided to attack Beirut almost as a way of blackmail to try to get the government to sign this kind of agreement to allow Israel to invade and occupy southern Lebanon. Now, this seems to be rather outrageous, with the idea that we're going to keep bombing and killing indiscriminately in Beirut until the government signs over saying we are allowed to occupy and invade southern Lebanon. Is that what I'm getting right, or am I getting this wrong? I mean, because otherwise I don't quite understand the bombing of Beirut in this way. What is going on? Am I getting this correct?
You are getting it 100% correct. It's basically terrorism. You know, you try to terrorize the population in order to reach your political goal. That's the definition of terrorism. Because the Zionists have been failing miserably in the invasion attempt in South Lebanon, it's now 46 days that they have deployed 5 corps, meaning 100 and something thousand soldiers. And 46 days, they're facing off only 6,000 Hezbollah fighters that have held them to a standstill, and they haven't been able to enter 1 inch of South Lebanon. Just for our viewers that don't remember, in 2006, the Zionists invaded Lebanon, and they were able in 33 days to enter 1 valley and go in as deep as 30 somewhat kilometers. In 1982, it took them only 8 days to reach from the border of South Lebanon all the way to occupy Beirut. So we can see how much of a beating that they are getting. They've lost tens of tanks and APCs, hundreds of Israeli soldiers dead, according to the Israelis themselves, in these 45 days. So they only take out their frustration on children, women, unarmed civilians. They've killed already 5 different journalists in Lebanon. They've killed almost 300 medics and doctors. They're targeting only purely civilian sites as a way to take out their frustration at their impetus on the battlefield. And to terrorize the population of Lebanon in hopes that the Lebanese population, flips against the resistance in South Lebanon. And that's a delusion. It will never happen, actually.
So the president, or let's say the prime minister, is not going to accept that agreement of effectively, because I got to be honest, when this conflict started, it confused the hell out of me. As an American, I have a certain point of view of the world that is not necessarily right in other countries. So my point of view initially was, okay, well, obviously the Lebanese military is going to get involved to help Hezbollah to push back Israel. Okay, well, that didn't happen. The Lebanese military didn't fire a shot. It was Hezbollah that was effectively fighting at southern Lebanon in order to fight back the invasion of Israel. And then I watched as the Lebanese government actually considered basically saying, look, we will sign the agreement where we will send our military into southern Lebanon. And I was like, well, there's no way. What are you doing? Like, it didn't fully make sense to me. And it took my producer, Laith, to explain basically the inner workings of Lebanon is far more complicated than that. I mean, what is going on the ground? Let's start from that angle. as you said, there are drones flying overhead. Hezbollah has fought Israel to a standstill in southern Lebanon. And so Israel has decided to bomb Beirut with this idea of trying to get the government to either have a civil war. Is that what Israel is trying to provoke?
Yeah, they're trying to provoke a civil war, but again, this is something that's impossible right now. You know, they wish that they can go back to the 1980s and 70s,
right,
when they were able to manipulate parts of the Christian population, the Maronite sect, to create these Christian supremacist parties like the Phalange here that conducted the massacres in the Palestinian refugee camps under the protection of the Israelis. Some of our listeners, viewers could remember the Sabra and Shatila massacre in 1982, and that was conducted by this Phalange party.
right.
You know, go forward in time, a decade and somewhat ago, the Maronite Church accepted the Pope as the representative of God. Basically, the Maronite Church got merged into the Catholic Church. And we've seen over the last year the Pope multiple times condemning the genocide in Gaza, condemning the massacres that are happening. So the ability of the instigating the Maronite Church and its priests here to preach hate was ended with that. So now what we have is that even those remnants of the Phalange party are unable to find preachers to preach this hate on their behalf. So they're not able to mobilize anybody within the Maronite sect.
I see.
The second thing is that in the vile animalistic behavior of the Zionists, it led them to target churches in Lebanon. There's now at least 12 churches destroyed, historical churches, some of the oldest on the planet, and many Christian villages in the south completely destroyed and emptied. So because of this indiscriminate fascism of the Zionists, although they want to instigate some revolt or whatever within the Christian community, their actions are driving the Christian community towards the resistance and solidarity with them. And we see now that almost all the churches in Lebanon opened their grounds for internally displaced, who are mainly Shia from the south. And we see the Christian villages taking in a huge amount of the internally displaced. So it is impossible at this point for the Israelis to instigate a civil war, and that's why they are going on this indiscriminate rampage of targeting civilian infrastructure and civilian homes.
Let me ask you, the Smotrich, the lunatic in Israel, has just come out and effectively said, we're going to annex the West Bank. Now, they were already occupying the West Bank, but now, after Trump's election, they apparently think Trump is going to back us on this, and so this is what we're going to do. To be honest, though, even before Trump got elected, it would be hard for me to see Joe Biden doing anything against it either. Meaning Joe Biden would have probably sat there as they would have gone through this, just like they're going through this other stuff. They seem to be using October 7th as their 9/11 moment, in the same way that the U.S. was like, we can reshape the Middle East because of 9/11. It seems that Netanyahu is taking it upon himself to say, we can create greater Israel now that we've had October 7th. Give me a take on that. I mean, is Israel winning? Because ultimately, it seems that all of this is predicated on this idea that Israel is beating Hamas, beating Hezbollah. They're going after Iran. They're taking the West Bank. They're attacking in Syria. They're attacking in Yemen. But is that the same thing as winning? Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm glad that you brought the new Middle East plan by the United States, because it's a great indicator of what could Israel achieve. I mean, the United States spent the good part of 2 decades trying to beat the Arabic and Muslim peoples in the region here into submission, with genocide of 1.5 million Iraqis, 500,000 Afghanis, 500,000 Syrians, 500,000 Libyans. And 2 decades of that genocide did not lead to a new Middle East as the empire wanted. And the Arabic people, the Muslim peoples in the region, still are defiant of American imperialism. So, can a puny vassal colony that we call Israel achieve what the United States, with all its might over 2 decades, couldn't achieve? Of course, the only people that believe that they can do that are those who think they are chosen people. And this is the core of the problem. You have these fanatic Zionists that actually think that there's a God in the sky that is not the God of Abraham, that is not the God of Moses, that said we come from one mother and one father and that we're all equal, and said don't steal, don't kill, don't covet your neighbor's belongings.
Yeah.
No, they believe in a different God that thinks that is vicious, this God that has a chosen people that we are all unequal to the rest of us, and that approves to them to kill, steal, and covet your neighbor's belongings. This is the core problem, and this is why the elite, the Zionist elite inside the colony and inside the West are separated from reality so dramatically that they can and they think that they can achieve what the United States didn't achieve in 2 decades.
Yeah. The reporting in the U.S. has been somewhat conflicting. In some respects, Joe Biden would grumble behind the scenes. In other respects, you'd have a situation where Joe Biden would approve of Israel going into Lebanon. And look, I think at the end of the day, there's been this question about whether it's the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail. Is this U.S. policy being affected by Israel, or is this Israel effectively hijacking the United States in order to affect its policy? Which one do you think it is? I mean, do you think it's basically, regardless of what the U.S. says and what the grumbling is behind the scenes, ultimately the U.S. is giving money, support, political support, diplomatic support, etc., to this project? Is this the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail?
I think it's both at once. Okay. And the way we can judge it is looking at what is the strategic goal of the United States. The strategic goal of the United States is to remain as the hegemon, the only empire on the planet. And once you understand that, you then looking at the map, you realize that the most important geopolitical position on this whole planet is Palestine. Not because we are special as Palestinians or we're better or whatever it is. It's just because it is the transportation and communication knot of the planet. That's all the communication, cultural or not, all the transport has to pass through that knot. And therefore, to remain the hegemon, you have no choice but to keep hold of it. So this is where the Zionists, what the Zionists understand. And this is why they can do whatever they want to, because they know that the United States has no choice if it wants to remain the hegemon, but to keep supporting and holding this colony in its position. So once we understand that, that means that it makes it easier for us to analyze, and then we look at what is the strategic goal of the Zionists. The strategic goal of the Zionists is to have permanency for this colony. And after 100 years of genocide and war against the Palestinians and the Arabs in the region, still the Arabic people refuse to accept the existence of this colony. And the Palestinians have yet to surrender. So once you look at it this way, and you see that the Palestinians, prior to October 7th last year, already have returned to being the majority within the historical land of Palestine. For the first time since 1948, the Palestinians inside the borders of Palestine have returned to being the majority. Therefore, the only thing left in front of the Zionists to do was either to accept equality and end apartheid and have one state for all its citizens, like happened in South Africa, and or initiate a new genocide that can change the demographic again and at least save them for another 100 years before the balance of demography returns to the side of the Palestinians.
But I don't see how that works. I mean, the reason why I say that is if you think about it, Israel does have the capacity to kill and murder a lot of people. They can slaughter women and children in prolific fashion, granted. But that's different than winning a war. I mean, the United States was able to kill, what, 1 million, 2 million Vietnamese, but we still lost that war. And even if you're talking about like Iraq or Afghanistan, look, we can kill and spend $10 trillion on Iraq and Afghanistan, but at the end of the day, the Taliban is now back in Afghanistan, and Iraq has been trying to kick us out for God knows how long. And so I look at this and I think to myself, okay, well, Israel has been able to murder a lot of Palestinians. They've been able to murder a lot of Lebanese. They've been able to bomb all of these places, but it's been a year, and they're still fighting a resistance group in Gaza. They're still fighting Hezbollah and have not been able to make progress in southern Lebanon. Despite being able to kill the heads of Hezbollah, they are still firing rockets into Israel and still, collecting, creating damage in that situation. And this air of invincibility that Israel once had has been shattered by the ability of Iran to show not just deterrence, but domination in the region. And so you have all of these people who have effectively left Israel. The economy is going into the toilet. How can a colony maintain itself under this scenario? I don't know how they believe that they're going to somehow escape from this with some kind of victory. I don't even know what victory looks like in this context. Give me your thoughts on that.
I mean, you are correct. And this is because you're a rational person and you're analyzing things rationally, right? And this is where the Zionists have separated themselves from reality. Look, I believe that within a year from today, Palestine will be liberated. There will be no more Zionists inside historic Palestine. And that could happen in two ways. Either the defeat of the Zionist colony and the acceptance of equality at the end of this year from today, and or we will all be dead. There will be a nuclear holocaust on this planet. Either way, there will be no more Zionist colony in the end of this. And this is what our viewers in the United States and in the rest of the Western world need to understand, that we are going towards this eventuality of either all of us are going to be living in a world war and a nuclear holocaust, or the Zionist colony has to end in a peaceful way.
Now explain that. Go into that for me. Go into the steps for that. Because what I think you're saying is that all things being equal, the fight that ends up happening can drag all of these other powers into the conflict. Because look, Israel is a nuclear power, right? Iran may well, as they've pointed out, if they feel like they're in danger, can also get a nuclear weapon. They even made the point of saying, technically, we can do this. This is not really a technical issue at this point. This is more of an issue for the Ayatollah, basically saying, don't do it. Go into it. Why do you believe that it could end up in a nuclear holocaust?
So let's look at the military reality right now. As you pointed out, they are militarily defeated on the ground inside Gaza. 40,000 Hamas fighters have been holding them to a standstill for 14 months. They are militarily defeated on the ground in Lebanon. They are militarily defeated in the air by Iran. And Yemen has, a virtual blockade on them that is requiring a full participation of the U.S., the U.K., and all of NATO bombardment almost on a weekly basis of Yemen to try to subdue Yemen. So what is the future right now? The only path forward for the Zionists is to drag the U.S. into directly fighting the war on their behalf. They're already fighting the war on their behalf, but in hidden. A lot of these air raids, not only on Yemen, that are being conducted by the U.S. and NATO, even the air raids here in Lebanon and in Gaza are partially being conducted by the West. You can't tell me that the Israelis can conduct 2,000 air raids in a span of a few hours on Lebanon with their few hundred aircraft. That cannot happen. Okay, so what we will see right now with from now till January and the inauguration of Trump is that Netanyahu will be allowed to go buck wild on the region, and in the hopes that he can destroy as much of the resistance as possible before the coming of Trump, so they can have better standing in a negotiation table when Trump arrives. But that's also a crazy talk, obviously. If the Israelis increase their bombardment of the region, they will face the same. They're already losing, as I said, against the axis of resistance. And so clearly, when Trump comes into power, he will not have a better situation militarily on the ground, and the Zionists will be wailing at that point, and they will have to. The U.S. has to enter the fight on their behalf. Let's say they attack Iran even without a nuclear weapon, but they attack its nuclear sites. That is actually nuclear warfare. There will be nuclear fallout on parts of Iran because of the attacks on these nuclear reactors. And it's good to remember that President Lukashenko of Belarus said that he will be providing a nuclear umbrella for Iran. So Iran doesn't even need to manufacture a nuclear weapon to respond at that point. Belarus will do that for them. Similarly, Iran can attack Israel's nuclear reactors without using nuclear weapons, and we will see the same nuclear fallout on the Zionist colony. So, but once the either nuclear sites are attacked or a nuclear weapon is used, then it will be free for all across the planet. North Korea has nuclear weapons. Belarus has nuclear weapons. Russia may use nuclear weapons on Ukraine at that point. So once the threat is acted on of using nuclear weapons or attacking nuclear sites, then it will be world war, and every nuclear power will be using its weapons. This is not, therefore, I personally think that it's not going to happen. There will be no use of nuclear weapons by Israel, and there will be no attacks on Iranian nuclear sites. And I like to quote the great poet, prophet, Bob Marley, "Have no fear for the atomic energy, for none of them can stop the time."
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what is that? A prophet, Bob Marley. Yeah, it's terrifying. And, with Donald Trump coming into office, he's, like I said, I have no idea what Trump is going to do. I mean, the reality of it is, I don't know how he could do much more than Joe Biden, though, frankly. I mean, Biden is basically sat there and let Netanyahu does anything he wants. When you said Netanyahu go buck wild, and my thought was, okay, what has he been doing up to this point, if not going buck wild? From your point of view, Iran is saying that they're going to launch True Promise 3, that effectively they are going to respond, and they're going to respond because they want to create a deterrence. They believe that Israel has lost its mind at this point, and Israel is not going to stop. Hence, they feel they need to make a show of that level of deterrence. Do you think they're really going to go through with this? And if they do go through with this, what happens after they go through with this? Like, this seems to be utter chaos at this point.
They will go through with it for sure, and it's going to be a bigger attack than True Promise 2.
Yeah.
Yesterday there was a joint summit of the Arabic League and the Organization of Islamic States in Riyadh, capital of Saudi Kingdom, and the vice president of Iran was there, the president of Syria was there, and practically all the presidents of the Arab and Muslim countries. And in this, I know that a lot of these countries just talk a lot, like Turkey and some of these Gulf countries. But if we look at the final statement from the summit, it was asking for a Chapter 7 resolution by the United Nations Security Council to force the end of the genocide in Gaza. So what does that Chapter 7 means? It means that they're asking for a no-fly zone over historic Palestine, and they're asking for an invasion force to defeat the Zionists and force them to end the genocide.
But
So
why don't
yes,
they do it? But why don't they do
yes,
it? Like when this, I mean, I got to be honest, man. The Arab states, the fact that they've allowed this level of killing of women and children to the tune of 40 to 100,000, and they just stood by and watched. And places like Saudi Arabia, Jordan is humiliating. Jordan was allowing attacks through its own territory. In fact, when they attacked Iran, apparently they flew through Jordan in order to make those attacks. And so it's like these people sit up there and talk while this happens month after month after month. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was deeply annoyed by the talk, either from Erdogan, the king of Jordan, or for that matter, even Saudi Arabia. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
Oh no, you're right, 100%. And this is why I, put the caveat there that these guys talk a lot. But one thing is that you could imagine that the last time something equivalent to this happened at the Security Council, where a resolution under Chapter 7 was requested, was the United States requesting to invade Iraq. And if we remember, the Russians and the Chinese voted at the time, vetoed, and the United States went ahead anyways and invaded Iraq.
Right.
So we're going at least to have a very similar situation. If the Arab and Muslim bloc and the African bloc and the Latin bloc and the old Warsaw bloc, basically Russia and China, put forward a resolution under Chapter 7 and the US vetoes it, this still gives the whole world the right to invade the Zionist colony. I don't expect, of course, Jordan and or those Gulf countries, which were all created by the British in World War I and World War II and after. Most of these Gulf states are, created in the 1960s or 70s. They're vassals, all of them. But it will give more legitimacy to anyone who is going to be conducting war against the Zionist colony. That's for sure.
But do you see any of these states getting to the point where the amount of blood that's being guzzled is enough for them to get involved? I mean, or are these states just puppets? Meaning, I don't have any belief that Jordan, Saudi Arabia cares about the Palestinian plight. I just don't think they do. They're, from their point of view, they were perfectly willing to make deals with Israel in order to ignore the Palestinian issue altogether and coming together with these kind of Abraham Accords. Do you think, is the issue, MBS at one point brought up this notion of him being deposed, saying that he could be assassinated or something like that. And he was bringing this up in the context of a population that is very angry about the Palestinian issue, whereas the leadership doesn't care about the Palestinian issue. Does the fact that there's this kind of upswell, this anger, whether it's being in Turkey, whether it's in Saudi Arabia, whether it's in Jordan for that matter, a large part of the Jordanian population are Palestinian, is there enough public anger and indignation to get any of these countries to get more involved? For God's sake, in Egypt, you have the corridor being taken by Israel, the Philadelphia corridor. Egypt hasn't done anything about it. They've complained, but they haven't done anything about it. Would there be a situation where these states would actually take military action over this issue, or is this pretty much off the table?
These states have been vessels for so long that it's impossible to see them change suddenly direction. Mm-hmm. Look at the King of Jordan. He's half British. His mother is not even Arabic. He had to have a whole year of training to speak Arabic correctly when he became the king.
Wow.
So there is no way that the Jordan as a state changes. But on the ground inside Jordan, the population is restless. There is demonstrations every couple of days across Jordan. There's thousands of Jordanians right now languishing in jail as political prisoners. All the youth that were leading these demonstrations over the last year have been rounded, the student leaders and others. And still, even with all this repression, we saw a couple of, a month ago or something, a Jordanian truck driver at the Alembi crossing bridge over the Jordan River take out 4 Israeli border, agents from point blank, right? So the population of Jordan is boiling, and at any moment could be in full revolt. Okay, and so this possibility of full revolt, let's say in Jordan, would be most likely in the situation of a full regional war, where the Iraqi resistance on the border of Jordan somehow invades, which is a big possibility. American bases in Jordan must be taken out in a situation of a full-out war in the region for the border of Palestine to be open for fighters to enter from Jordan. So I think Jordan is the weakest link amongst all the vassals of the US in the region. In Egypt, the population is so oppressed and so impoverished on purpose over the last 5-6 years. The US and the elite in Egypt did what the US wants, and we saw how the waters of the Nile were being cut off from Egypt. We saw how the all the aid to Egypt was being cut by the Gulf countries and so on. And that's all to force the Egyptian population to be stuck thinking about their day-to-day bread and butter. What are they going to eat instead of what is their state doing? But again, I think in a situation of a full-out regional war, the Egyptian military right now, there is a lot of discontent inside it, because the Egyptian military sees itself as the origin of Arab nationalism. Egypt has the glory of Jamal Abdel Nasser in the 1940s and 50s. So and the last time there was an anti-colonialist change in Egypt, it happened through the Free Officers' Revolt led by Jamal Abdel Nasser. So the possibilities of change inside Egypt are only going to come from inside the military.
Like, is there something? Is there a question that you want to be asked that I'm not asking, if that makes sense? Like, is there something that I don't know what I don't know, if that makes sense, about what's something that is either going on the ground or something of a larger context about what is basically taking place? I mean, I guess from my point of view, we're seeing a new world come into fruition, and all of this stuff is chaos in the birth of that new world. And I think part of that new world is this notion of eliminating hegemons. And I agree with you that from the standpoint of the US, the last major colony is Israel. Like, if you think about it, many of the other colonies around the globe have fundamentally fell apart or have become states. So the US was a colony, it's become a state. Australia has become a state on its own terms. But this notion of Britain creating little colonies around the world, for the most part, has ended with the exception of Israel. And as I point out to people, Israel is very similar to the United States. I mean, the United States got to an area, expanded, killed all of the Native Americans in the population or put them in reservations. If that's not what Israel is doing, what is it? The only difference is these are not Native Americans. These are the indigenous population of Arabs that they're basically colonizing, put them into camps, either exterminating or expelling them. It's very similar in regards. I think the main difference is there's no video camera for people to see it, whereas there's a camera where you could see them killing or imprisoning all of these people. I guess my major question that I've used to ask people that I never really got an answer to is, how does it end? At the end of this, what does it look like? Is it, because I can't see us going back to status quo. Like, I can't see us going back to something that looks like October 6th. I mean, I don't know how you kill 30,000 children and then it's like, okay, well, let's go back to normal. I don't see that happening. From your point of view, what does this look like?
Yes, we are now living the same moment between World War I and World War II. when Germany, Italy, and Japan refused to end their colonialism. If you remember, because the British and the French didn't end their colonialism and just relabeled it as mandate in the
Right.
Arabic world.
Right.
And the Germans, the Italians, and the Japanese went crazy, and we saw the slaughter in Libya and Ethiopia and Korea and Angola and so forth, right, at the hands of those powers. And that moment led to the collapse of the League of Nations and all the international law body that was agreed upon. So now we see the West as a whole, with the empire ruled from DC,
Right.
rejecting international law and rejecting all the UN agencies. The biggest example is the attacks on UNRWA that we're seeing. So once the West has refused international law and the international agencies are unable to implement international law, that means that we're living the collapse of. And at this moment, there is no such thing as international law or international human rights law.
There never was.
And yes, and so this is going to be a violent period. And this is why the biggest possibility is that we will have World War III if the West doesn't agree to equity with the rest of humanity, equality with the rest of humanity. And so it is a dangerous moment. The UN and all its agencies are collapsing. International law doesn't exist. And it will be written, the new international law will be written by the blood of the victors that fight for it. And, the rise of BRICS and other bodies like BRICS is the, beginnings of filling the gap that the UN is leaving behind it.
I totally agree with you. And that's the way I was looking at it too. I mean, it's chaos. And I strongly suspect that what's going to end up at the end of it is no more hegemons. I have a hard time believing that the world is going to accept this premise of having a currency that can be used as a weapon. These countries that have the ability to just kind of flout economic law in regards to the killing and everything else. I get the sense that there'll be something new, even though I don't necessarily what that something new is. Laith, thank you for this, man. I really appreciate this. And let me ask you this one last thing. Is there anything that I should ask you that I'm not thinking about asking you that is of importance that I'm just fundamentally missing?
Yes, there's a few things that we can quickly go through. Since the morning, the Zionists have been bombarding actually Beirut. There's been at least 8 different raids on Beirut. At the same time, the resistance has been bombarding the industrial zones around Haifa, Akka, and Tel Aviv. Yesterday had the biggest wave of missiles fired since the beginning of the war by Hezbollah. And at the same time, the Yemenis fired a hypersonic missile. This is their 4th or 5th time they do that. And hit the target, main Israeli airbase around Tel Aviv. And on a daily basis, the Iraqi resistance is conducting upwards of 12 operations, drones and guided missiles hitting the Zionist colony. And they are concentrating their firepower, the Iraqis, on the Golan Heights. And and this is very important because it seems like the Golan Heights will be the major battlefield if in a situation of a breakout of a regional war. The Israelis attacked just outside Damascus yesterday in the Sid Zainab area. They're claiming that they assassinated Hezbollah's commander for the Golan troops. And that shows you how worried they are about the increase of numbers of Iraqi, Yemeni, and Lebanese fighters on the borders of the Golan Heights. This is, kind of an overall of what is happening. And I think we should all keep our eyes on the Golan Heights in the next few weeks. It could be the major battlefield.
One more question. Do we know the number of casualties for Israel? I mean, because clearly they're taking casualties. One of the things that Gallant, before he was fired, he pointed out effectively, like, yes, he wants these kind of ultra-religious or ultra-Orthodox into the military saying that, part of it was an issue of fairness, but also they needed the manpower because they were losing people. Do we know how many people they have been losing in these conflicts? I would imagine they're taking a much heavier death toll in Lebanon than they were in Gaza.
Yes. I mean, if we just count the number of tanks and APCs that Hezbollah destroyed on camera, since the beginning of the attempted invasion, we're talking about 40 somewhat tanks. So
Wow.
each of those tanks has a crew of at least 4 soldiers inside. And there's no way that once the tank is on fire that those soldiers survive. But
Yeah.
let's be very generous, okay, and say half of them died and half of them survived. So that's alone in those tanks, 80 soldiers dead. And Hezbollah released multiple videos of targeting Israeli soldier gatherings that are outside the armored vehicles or bunkers and so on. And in those videos, you can again count at least 40, 50 Israeli soldiers dead. So the numbers that the Israelis are claiming to have died are a fraction of what the reality is. And I want to say, I personally think that they've lost, at least 1,000 soldiers on the front here in South Lebanon. Remember that Hezbollah is only releasing a fraction of the operations in video format, especially that they withdrew all the GoPros from their soldiers on the front after the pager terrorist attack. So we're only seeing videos filmed on DSLRs and such from far away and or from the camera on the missiles or the drone. We're not seeing the actual fighting face to face inside the border villages in Lebanon. But according to the Israelis themselves, every time they enter a village with a platoon, 1 or 2 Hezbollah fighters takes out the whole platoon.
Yeah.
And so it's clearly that they have, multiple folds the number of injured and dead that they are claiming.
Yeah. You expect them to be somewhat dishonest about the number of people they're going to lose. Laith, man, thank you for this. Laith Marouf. He is an award-winning multimedia producer and broadcasting law consultant. Laith, what can people follow you, by the way? What can people find you?
You can find us at freepalestine.video, and from there you can get all our social media networks accounts. We're on Twitter at TV Free Palestine. And yes, please watch our content. We have journalists all across the West Bank and Lebanon and Jordan giving you daily reports and much more.
Laith, I will be following you. Man, thank you for this. I really appreciate you joining me. All right, let's take a break. Guys, if you dig this content, like the show, subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell. Like, share, and share the content. Do that also. Share it to any and everybody that you think may like it. Also, if you enjoy and dig the content, please consider giving through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats. All chats will be read by the end of the show. Don't be racist, sexist, or bigoted. Even if you're taking the piss out of me, it will be read. Hit the like button. I'll be back in about a minute. Just to reset. Back shortly.